basically what we're looking at is a movement that became an industry. And I can't really think of any other movements that have became an industry. Maybe you can, but I can't. Am I loud enough on this microphone? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. So, back when I was in high school, I didn't think so.
What?
All right, so back when I was in high school and I started smoking pot, all of a sudden my grades went from like 70s to 90s, and I was like, what the hell's going on here? They told me that I was supposed to become a quadriplegic, grow man boobs, have no semen, and all this other stuff, but all my anatomy was growing normal, and my intellect was improving. Can you guys hear me now? All right. Huh?
It's not amplified.
No, it's as high as it's going to be.
All right, so should I go to the podium?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let me sorry, boys and girls. You should have did it. That's great.
I wasn't expecting this, but that was a damn good speech, wasn't it?
No.
So, I was reading through High Times magazine and learning about cannabis, and reading The Emperor Has No Clothes by Jack Harrer, and I'm like, why is everybody missing the boat? Why are all my friends only interested in getting high when this plant is so goddamn fascinating? And, you know, I didn't talk to anybody about this because nobody really cared. They just wanted to listen to the Grateful Dead, rap music, because back in those days it was just happening, and, you know, and I'm like, yo, this is like, we can save the world with this plant. And they were like, yeah, but Jerry Garcia is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, he is. But like, this is something that we can get a lead on, and we can actually have a career with, because California had passed Prop 215 in 1996 when I was in 11th grade. And by that time, a lot of people say, hey, when you were young, did you ever think that you want to be in the cannabis industry? And I'm like, yeah, actually, that was my goal from day one. I started selling pot, and I wanted to actually do it professionally, right? And but then it was like, it became more than wanting to sell pot. It became like a true obsession with wanting to wake people up to the information that I was processing like crazy, and I couldn't get enough of, and there wasn't enough reliable information out there. So basically, I turned to the group that everybody turns to, who back in those days, which was normal. They were like the only people that you could really find that was really doing any work. So I reached out to Empire State Normal back in like 1997, and they never returned my phone calls. I wanted to help them. I wanted to help them grow. I was insecure about taking leadership because my parents, well, my mother specifically, was totally against cannabis. My dad smoked it every day. So, but I really respect my parents, and I love my parents. And, you know, I was really insecure about coming out of the shadows as a cannabis advocate. Even though I had already been arrested and the cops came to my house and they knew I was selling, and they hated me for it. It was very embarrassing. They took me out in front of my grandmother, and it was like a really traumatic experience. And if you talk to most activists in any cause we're talking about, it always starts with a very personal situation that really disrupted their lifestyle, or somebody that really meant something very important to them. So my photographic memory right now goes right back to those moments, and it just makes me want to rail against this like 10 times harder every time I think about it. And I never thought I was doing anything wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing, getting real medicine that really helps people to people in need. And the proof was in the pudding, as I watched my satisfactory or not living up to expectation report cards go into high honor roll scholarships. The more pot I smoked, the higher my grades went. So everything was like the world was upside down from what everybody's telling me and from what's actually happening in real life. And I'm smart enough to know at that age what propaganda is, what bullshit is. I'm from New York, so excuse my language. So basically I'm a very passionate person. I believe in myself, and as I got older, I did more and more so. And actually, from the time I was young, I was training myself to take this role, to take this leadership role, to become a quality speaker, somebody who speaks educated about this, and also have the business acumen to help other people take advantage of this opportunity, which I knew was going to come to the East because it started in California. And they always say, so goes California, so goes the nation. So I knew eventually we would have an opportunity in my lifetime. So with all that said, what was really important to me was the fact that I didn't like the way cannabis was being presented by my friends. I didn't like the way cannabis was being presented by the culture that I was seeing develop in California at the time. I wanted people to have respect for this plant. I wanted them to look at this plant as the great unifier, because when I go to some of these cannabis events, there's a 4-year-old, there's a 94-year-old. There's every single color, shape, size, creed, and whatever you can find. I admit I am not the biggest fan of President Barack Obama, but what he said recently, which was that Americans need to look towards things that unify us and not the things that don't. And what is going to do it more than a plant that will give you food, clothing, shelter, medicine, spirituality, and culture? Please tell me. Because this is exactly the thing that we can all come together around and agree upon is beneficial. And as a result, when I came to the development of this idea of a Cannabis and Hemp Association, I started with, what is a logo or graphic that we can all get behind? And that pot leaf to me symbolizes everything that disturbed me about the cannabis industry. It symbolized just reckless drug use to me. You know, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with recreational cannabis use. I do it all the time. But at the same time, we need to educate people that don't want anything to do with cannabis, that cannabis is a good thing. And when they see that leaf, they think of the guy who doesn't work and sits in his basement playing video games, smoking weed every single day. You know, we need to convince people from the Far East who have extremely prohibitionist cultures, who are a part of our community, that this is actually a good thing that can benefit them, and so that they don't come to me when their mother or father is 3 days from death and saying, "Scott, can cannabis be the miracle that'll save my dad who's going to die in 72 hours? It's like, well, where were you 3 years ago? I would have loved to have helped you. And then they call me the next day and say, my dad's dead. And that happens to me and Todd every other week or month or whatever it is, all too often. So what you're seeing here is the seedling. The seedling represents either it's marijuana, it could be hemp, it could be ruderalis. It's the root of what all the different genetics of cannabis. It's a very benign logo. So those people ask me all the time, what the hell is that? You know, it looks like the tip of something phallic. I go, yeah, I know, but it's a seedling. You know, and if you ever see any cannabis grow, that's essentially what it looks like. The seed splits at the top, and then it grows into being what its life cycle is going to be. And then the other question people ask me is, well, isn't cannabis and hemp the same thing? Why are you Cannabis and Hemp Association? Well, I don't really like the word marijuana. In fact, I absolutely detest it. I rail against it the same way that somebody would rail against the Washington Redskins, because we don't go to a Native American person and say, hey, Redskin, how you doing? No, we don't do that. It's not right, like, in my opinion. In my opinion. So, I don't like the word marijuana. It has racist roots, deeply racist roots. And I try to encourage everybody in the New York market to stay away from that word as much as possible. And it's interesting because you meet like the attitudes of people that use the word cannabis and the attitudes of the people that use the word marijuana are oftentimes very different around this plant. So when we use the word cannabis, I am referring to those plants which have a THC content higher than 0.3%, for those who know what I'm talking about. And hemp would be those parts of the plant that have pretty much no THC at all. So what the whole goal of the Cannabis and Hemp Association really comes down to two main things. One, I don't like the fact that the colonialist method of divide and conquer has happened to this industry, meaning we've taken one plant species, separated it into two, and in doing so, divided our power to take political change and divided it apart. We need to bring this plant together as one, and we need to rail against the system in order to create the sort of business systems and regulations that we want so that small business can compete with big business. So this is what the basis and foundation of CHA is. We're more than the MJBA, Marijuana Business Association. We're not just interested in that. We're interested in cannabis and hemp, bringing it together. Secondly, we want to create a global communications network so that you all have an opportunity to go online and see what's happening in every community all across the world. We're looking to build Cannabis and Hemp Association chapters all across the world that put together offline events like the ones we're seeing today, and bringing those events online so that you can learn about the unique ideas that are coming across about a plant that has absolutely infinite potential.
Yeah.
You need to see these things. We need to learn. Right now, because this industry is broken up on a state-by-state basis, there is cultures that are developed in each state which are very different as a total. And unfortunately, there are people that might not agree with or like the culture that's developing in their community. Those people need to know that it's not like that everywhere. So under the CHA, we're not going to take over the whole industry, let's be realistic. But I'd like to create a bubble that people are more than welcome to join in and see what's really going on across the world. And right now, we have an association in Albany. We have an association in Maine and in Massachusetts, and we're opening up one in Michigan and in Puerto Rico this year. It'll be our first international chapter that we're bringing forth. So the future for the CHA, we're spreading the disease. I'm very proud to do that. So that's what we are, and you can connect with us. Our social media is right there. I hope you guys had a chance to get a business card. And that's who we are, and I like to talk about the cannabis industry, because that's really what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about disrupting big pharma. I'm passionate about disrupting chemical companies. I'm passionate about disrupting environmental companies that are just destroying the environment with different fibers and textiles, such as cotton, which are loaded in pesticides, that hemp is such a more superior and versatile textile. And frankly, I'm just passionate about seeing cannabis growing everywhere, smelling it, and knowing that the carbon is being sucked out of this earth and counteracting all of the CO2 that's going to be going up into the air under Mr. Trump's presidency, because he plans on becoming energy independent, putting in a Keystone pipeline, exploiting all the Texas oil that they just found, and all the shale gas in Pennsylvania and Ohio and all these different places. What are we going to do? Are we going to just sit back and let this country become like China, where you wake up to it looks like you have a ceiling above you? We don't want that. I want to look up to a blue sky. And how are we going to do that? We're going to grow hemp. We're going to grow hemp everywhere. We are. Because I'm not going to stop until that happens. I mean, hopefully we'll leave a legacy, and people will continue to spread this message. So here's the great thing about the cannabis industry, and we're going to go right into it, is when you do this, this is social entrepreneurship in its purest form. You're making money while making the world a better place. Does it get better?
No.
It doesn't, right? So you have the choice when you get into this industry. You can develop some sort of a cannabis company that continues to perpetuate the stoner stereotype and lead people down a path that can potentially increase mental or psychological issues, or you can choose to get involved in more holistic ways that best utilize this plant's full potential. That's completely up to you, but if you're going to be somebody in this industry that's going to bring disfavor or any sort of negative stigmata or perpetuate that going forward, please do not be my friend. Do not connect with me on social media, and because I'm not interested in really knowing you besides on a personal level. I just want to be frank.